Hello and welcome to another episode of Casting Reflections on Black Mirror, the podcast that takes an episode of Black Mirror and, as it says, cast reflections. As always, I'm Dan P and I've got Dan S with me. Hi, Dan.
Hi, good evening.
More importantly, we've got a third person joining us, and it's actually quite funny because the episode has got 3 parts, so it's worked out perfectly almost. I've got James from Seismic Cinema. Hi, James.
Hi, folks. How we doing? Okay?
Very good, very good. Although I'm a bit worried because last time we had someone from your pod, it almost got them chucked out of the pod at Seismic Cinema. So have we got we're all good. We've got permission for your appearance tonight.
We're all good. All above board. The last time Colin was on, he missed one of our pods, the Big Trouble Not China pod, and so we were let loose for the night because Colin is the one who usually hosts the pods.
Right.
And so we were let loose, Paul and I. So we're still there, so it couldn't have been that bad.
Okay, but well, as long as we're all right, as long as we're all right. So actually, I should say, fellow PodPack member from the Seismic Cinema. Yeah, so as you said, it's a little group of us, spearheaded by Chat Tsunami. We've got yourselves, you've got Casting Views, we've got Review It Yourself, Nerdstalgic, and 2 Girls, 1 Reusable Cup. I think I've covered us all, haven't I? So yeah, do you just want to give people just the selling pitch for your podcast?
No pressure then. Colin will be listening to this. So I'm James from Seismic Cinema, and we are a movie and TV podcast who just review anything and everything pretty much. We've also got a sister podcast as well called Seismic Soccer, and it's just generally kind of talking about, previous links to football. It's, up and coming news. We live the glory days of, Premier League, world football. So pretty much anything is up for debate on our Seismic Soccer podcast. You can find us on pretty much every social that's out there: YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Threads, Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff. So yeah, so if you like movies and TV shows, as well as your football podcast, then come and check us out.
Have you done any podcasts about movies with football in them? Could do like a crossover.
Yeah, well, not yet. It's a good shout though. We did a planning meeting recently, and we have pretty much done 6 months of planning. So, and one that has not came up yet. So,
well, that's organised.
Yeah.
That's organised, isn't it?
Yes, it has to be. It has to be, man.
I was a big fan of Mean Machine. I thought that was a brilliant film. There you go. There's a film about football and films.
Is that one with Vinnie Jones in it?
Vinnie Jones, yeah. I really liked it.
Vinnie Jones. Thanks for that, James. Dan, might as well, as we've got the advertising going around, do you want to talk about just football while we're here? Because then we should set up a friendly, actually, with Seismic Soccer. But do you want to talk? Yeah. I've done this to you again, haven't I?
You've done it again. Absolutely zero warning. So we are a podcast about football, so we're called Just Football. You can find us at Just Football Pod on X, or formerly known as Twitter, and on Instagram. We do it weekly, so we aim for like recording on the Mondays to talk about the weekend that's just gone, for release on Tuesdays. We try and do a bit more outside the Prem as well, a bit kind of across the world. But yeah, come and join us, talk about football.
Yeah, I'm up for a friendly match.
Yeah, let's do it.
There we go.
Yeah.
We'll get that sorted out. Yeah, let's get on with the show then. So we are doing season 4, episode 6, Black Museum. Now, James, I think you specifically, I remember you reached out because you really liked this episode, didn't you? You wanted to specifically be on this one.
Yeah, so I reached out to you to talk about the USS Callister initially, and I just think our schedules get mixed up and things. So this is pretty high up my list in terms of being the best. So I was quite eager to come on and discuss it and hear your thoughts.
Good. And Dan, don't say anything now, but I'll be eager to hear your view, because when I initially mentioned this episode, your first thought was you didn't like this, but you're not sure if you mixed it up. I want you to keep it now a secret kind of till the end.
Okay.
I will be honest, I don't recall this episode. I got a feeling I must have seen it, but these early series, I do seem to have forgotten so much about them. because it's a fairly lengthy episode. So it was, as always, written by Charlie Brooker, directed by Cole McCarthy, and debuted on the 29th of December 2017. Now, this for me was very reminiscent to White Christmas in that it felt like a feature-length episode, and there was 3 distinct bits to it which seemed to link up. Normally I say who's in it. I'm only going to call 2 people out, really, because you've got the 2 people that link all stories. You've got Douglas Hodge as Rollo Haynes and Letitia Wright as Nish. And again, another one, Letitia Wright, another one who appeared in Black Mirror a year before she kind of got big in Marvel. So we've had a few now. Oh my God, Agent Carter. What's her name? Hayley Atwell. That's it. I'd forgotten. We had obviously the guy from Doctor Strange. I'm forgetting all the names now, and I'm sure there was someone else.
We had Falcon, didn't we, in a later one? But I think that was after he played Falcon, though. But we should check that date. But yeah, he did appear.
Yeah, Letitia Wright, the year before she appeared in Black Panther. So it starts off with her. She's driving through like a desert type terrain. She pulls up at a petrol station, which was called BRB, Be Right Back. And I think what I should say here as well, normally I do a thing on Easter eggs, but this episode is basically one massive Easter egg, right? Again, which we'll explain. So I'm only going to call out some specific ones. Otherwise, we'll be here all night just talking about those. And at first, I didn't pick it up at first. So I was saying, oh, look, that was from this episode. Then I realised what was going on, so I gave up. So she pulls up at the petrol station, deserted, no one else there. And across the way, she sees a building called Rollo Haynes Black Museum. She goes there, but it's shut. She then keeps knocking on the door, and I think Rollo opens the door, and he looks kind of like a circus ringmaster, doesn't he, in his appearance? She speaks to Rollo. He opens the door. They start talking, and she enters the museum after going through a detector. And again, this is where I started picking up things. So we see Victoria Scillane from White Bear. We see the main museum. There's a robot bee from Hated in the Nation, the Archangel tablet, bloodied and damaged. So the fact that was there, bloodied and damaged, we know that this is in the universe, actually real time in the universe, as it were, not like a parallel version. Through conversation, he says it's a museum of authentic criminological artifacts. If it did something bad, it's in here. He says most people rush through to go to the main exhibit. So again, we've got this mystery of this main exhibit behind a curtain, then give it a 1-star review. And he starts talking about this one particular artifact. So he says the first one we get our first story on is called, and I've got to say this right, the Dawson's Symphatic Diagnosis Machine. And this is then when we get the flashback. Now it goes to St. Juniper's Hospital, which I'm going to assume is the one in San Junipero. I think we can probably agree on that. And yeah, to kind of summarize this story, I mean, this one went to places where I didn't think it would go towards the end of this one. So you see a doctor treating a patient, the patient dies, and Rollo appears. He's in a suit, so he's obviously not this museum owner at the time. He's saying he can help him. He's saying, wouldn't it be good to know why the patient's died? I've got something that we should talk about. Goes back to the office, pulls out 2 stuffed rats. And the funny thing I learned about these 2 rats, and the names he gave them were the names of the characters in Shut Up and Dance. So again, yeah, that was I thought I'd call that one out because I thought that was quite funny. So he pulls the 2 rats out and he demos what would be a brain transmitter. But what he'd actually be doing is transferring physical experience. So it's not memories as such, but it's what that person or what that entity is feeling. He then pulls out the bigger device and says, imagine as a doctor if you could feel what your patient does. He says there are patients that can't talk, whether it's language barrier or they're too young. Think about how we could get help for them quicker. The doctor agrees to it and has this weird, almost like Frankenstein's bolt implant, isn't it, into his neck, which just feels odd when we see all the streamlined tech we've had. Paired up to it is, I've actually called it like a hairnet, and it does, doesn't it? It looks like a big sort of technological hairnet. Put it on a patient and the feelings, he then feels what the patient's feelings and could get to diagnosis straight away. But it's obviously clear that he's starting to really enjoy the fact that he can do that. And you get the first sign, obviously, and I was going to ask a question. Either of you can answer it or decline to answer if you want. But he then starts wearing it during sex with his girlfriend, right? Because he wants to get that sensation. So I guess the question is, would curiosity take over? And would you? I mean, don't have to answer it. But...
It's hard to know how to answer that question without being faced with it. But I do wonder if curiosity would get the better of you. I don't know is the honest answer. He obviously becomes addicted to it. So it's obviously something he's curious about and then becomes addicted to it because every time something's happening between the two of them, she's always wearing that blue head mask, which I reckon must become quite annoying after a while. But yeah, I think I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that question is.
Non-committal. I like it. Yeah. I like it. Yeah. James, any view on that? Because I guess what he's saying is he's saying from a medical standpoint, he's obviously feeling his own orgasm as well as experiencing the female one at the same time. So he's saying for medical purpose, that's what he's doing it for.
I mean, it is good to be curious, isn't it? I don't know. I think I might have to sit in the fence for that one as well.
Let's move on swiftly.
It feels like there's a line between being curious and sick, and I don't know where I don't know where that line is.
Yeah. Moving on. So then a patient comes in. I think it's a senator comes in. He's experiencing a pain that he hasn't known. So he puts the transmitter on. He doesn't know what he's feeling. Then I believe the patient dies, and I think he dies for 5 minutes, and then they bring him back. And it's at that point something then kind of almost snaps, it feels like, in the doctor's brain, doesn't it? That's the moment where you feel he starts to become addicted to the sensation, because this patient's died and has come back, and it obviously kind of affected him. He seemed to get a kick out of it. So much so that an elderly patient comes into the hospital who's having a cardiac arrest and doesn't start treating her initially because he wants to feel the pain that this lady's going through. Anyway, so I think because of that, he's suspended. And then during the suspension, he ends up accidentally hurting himself. I think he breaks a mug and cuts himself and realizes he enjoys the pain. And then it leads to a horrible scene, isn't it, where you hear sort of all sorts of things. And he's in front of his bathroom mirror, isn't he? And he's cutting himself.
You see chunks of finger, don't you? And like lumps of like body. I found that scene really, really difficult to watch.
Because it's quite graphic, isn't it?
It was hard to watch. His teeth were coming out as well, weren't they?
Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. Oh, God. Do you know what it is with me? It's teeth.
Yeah.
Anything with teeth in a horror film or something, and that's what creeps me out.
It's eyes for me. If he was to go near his eyes, it would be. Oh, I'd have to turn it off.
I agree. Yeah.
No, man.
Yeah, so basically he's starting to mutilate himself because he's not treating patients. That's how he's now getting his kicks. But there's a narration, I think Rollo saying that ultimately, though, the problem he was having is after a while, what he's missing is, he said, when you hurt yourself, you're going to hurt yourself. He said what was missing was the fear. And this is then when it kicks up another level. So he basically kidnaps a homeless person and murders them. And again, he's torturing, but he's torturing them first, right? You see when they get to him, he's got a drill, isn't he? And you don't see anything graphically, but he's obviously torturing him to get his kick. So basically, I've probably not done that too much justice, but it is a real descent from this guy being obviously a top doctor to almost being like
American Psycho type thing.
Well, yeah, he's an addiction, isn't it? It's almost like a descent into hell. And I think because of that, he then ends up in a coma, and that's how his story ends. But the one thing I will say then before I hand over is what I love about stories where it's being narrated or being recounted by someone. Rollo, when he's telling Nish the story, says that he got so turned on by murdering the homeless guy that he got an erection, and in his coma, he's got a permanent one. And she's like, saying, really? And he goes, no, I lied about that bit. And then it changes to just seeing him in his coma without the tent pole in.
I actually thought his narration was actually really good. Like the way he kind of told the story, and even with the rats, when he can't, because initially it was about transferring knowledge, didn't it? And he went into so much detail about the rat having the other person's knowledge, and then Nish was like, "Did it work?" He goes, "No, of course not." But this happened, and I thought that was
Yeah.
quite a cool swerve in the commentating.
He's an excellent character in this.
Yeah.
The way he portrays it. So that's what we compartmentalize as story one. So should we go through all of them and then comment about some of the technology? I think, let's do that.
Okay.
So James, you're up next for story two.
Right, okay. So story two was the monkey teddy bear. So Nish as she passes the hairnet, moves on to and sees the teddy bear in the glass cabinet. And of course, she's quite curious about that, asks about, how is this basically, why is this in here? Is this, has this committed a crime? And then, of course, Rollo goes into his story, and he's in story mode again. So this story featured Jack and Carrie. It's kind of started at how they met, and I could be wrong here. I think they met at a party, and does Carrie fall pregnant at that point after the party, or just after? Anyway, they're together raising their boy, but Carrie suffers a severe brain injury, and she's in a coma, and Jack wants to reconnect with her in some way, shape or form, and she's in the hospital, and out of nowhere, we've got Rollo who comes in again. I've got. He's like a kind of car salesman, isn't he? He's like comes in and he goes, I've got something for you here. This might work. So
yeah.
He says he's got some groundbreaking technology that can transfer consciousness. So quite curious about that. He decides to implant the consciousness into Jack's head.
Yeah, because he says we only use 40% of our brain, so we've got 60% of our brain doing nothing.
Yeah.
He said, so why not use it?
Yeah. Before that, there was kind of technology being used where the buttons were being used in the hospital, where they could try and get some sort of emotion from her. But they transferred the consciousness to Jack's head. So essentially, what would happen there then? The wee device he'd have on, she could see and feel everything that he feels. So that's quite an interesting part as well when we find out about that one. So Carrie still to communicate with Jack again through this kind of neural interface. As things start to progress, she's happy that she can see her boy. You can't speak to him essentially, but at least she can see him kind of growing up. But imagine having someone in your head talking to you all day, and so there's a bit in this story where I can't remember where he was exactly, but he's in a lift and a female walks into the lift, and so she's still switched on, so she can see what he's seeing, and essentially he turns his eye towards the female, and it's like, I can't believe you're looking at her, and he's like, oh, I'm not looking at her. And she says to him, well, I can feel your erection just now as we speak. And I'm going, all right, so that I didn't realise that, so that was interesting. But all this time, you start to see this relationship beginning to unravel, because he's starting to get annoyed now. And the novelty period's worn off, starting to get annoying now. So I've said here, he's speaking to the females, and she's starting to kind of control him to a certain degree, of who he can't speak to. So he shuts her off, and he turns the interface off. We then see a clip where he turns it back on again, and it's like their anniversary or something, and it's Halloween, and she sees he's talking to her. I think he's facing the mirror at the time, or he's in the room actually, and you can see the pumpkins and things on the table, and it's like, oh, why did you do that? And he's like, sorry, I won't do it again. But then, interestingly for me, she said, why is there pumpkins on the table? And he goes, well, it's Halloween coming up, and it's their anniversary. So time for her didn't move. It just stayed stationary. But for him, it moved. I think he was off for maybe 6 or 7 weeks or something, he said.
I think it was 2 months.
2 months,
Yeah, you
yeah.
put her on pause for 2 months.
months.
Yeah.
What I found funny about that scene was when he kind of said, "To make up for it, I'm going to eat this cake." I've switched you on for 6 to 7 weeks, but this cake will make it worth it.
Yeah, I've got your favourite cake, so when I eat it, you'll enjoy it. You know? I mean, you didn't see your son for 2 months, but if I get this cake, you know. So kind of things move on from there. We then see that Chat's got a new neighbour. Again, you can see that he's quite interested in her, and to that point where she's kind of arguing with him again. Don't talk to her, etc., etc. To the point where he turns her off again, and then it kind of cuts to a scene where they are. I can't remember the person next door's name now. I've not written it down, but anyway. Cuts to a scene we're in the park, and he's kind of arguing with himself, sitting down in the park. You can tell that he's obviously arguing with Carrie, but for anyone looking around, he's kind of talking to himself. He's looking very strange. And then it's essentially, he can't handle it anymore. He needs to get her out of his head, so he goes back to the St. Junipers, and he wants it to. There has to be some kind of. Well, I think he wants her out completely, but then. As technology advances, Rollo's got a brand new feature. So you can transfer the consciousness to something else. And this is where the teddy bear, the monkey bear, in the Black Museum. So Jack decides, along with his new partner, that it would be the best interest to have Carrie's consciousness transferred over to a teddy bear. Yes, so it kind of cuts from there. We kind of in a point of view of the teddy bear of Carrie at this point, because we see the wrapping paper getting unwrapped, and you just see Parker. I think Parker is the boy's name. His face, and you can see Carrie at this point as well. That wait a minute. So her consciousness is transferred to the teddy bear. So she can no longer annoy Jack. She can't feel what he feels, and it's just basically left to she can see but can't communicate with anyone, with the exception of 2 phrases. So the monkey was for Parker, and if Carrie wanted to communicate with Parker, the 2 phrases were monkey needs a hug, and monkey, what was the other one? Monkey loves you. Monkey loves you. Monkey loves you. And when you cut to Carrie, she's sitting in a chair, whatever button she presses, that is what's said. And yeah, so her consciousness is completely now into the monkey. It was kind of foreshadowed before that in the hospital, where there's 2 buttons as well. So it's kind of progressed into that. As this story keeps on going, we still get the narration from Rollo, and he says, like any good toy, people get bored of it. So the monkey is thrown away, and basically Carrie's trapped inside the teddy bear. I keep saying teddy bear, the monkey. Again, can't shut her off. She's constantly visible, to the point where the monkey is thrown, and she can see Jack and his new partner, I think maybe starting to kind of have sex, and then she closes the door over. So as it continues back into the Black Museum, Nish asks Rollo, I don't understand the crime here. And Rollo says, well, it's now illegal to transfer consciousness to limited formats. Apparently, you need to have at least 5 emotions, and the monkey doesn't have that. And this is what the law stated by the UN, and it was the reason why he got sacked from his job, essentially because of this particular incident. So I know I've kind of glossed over a wee bit there, and I've probably missed a wee bits and bobs out, but hopefully we can come back and kind of patch it up.
I think it's a good.
No,
good
I think
cover.
it covers it. Yeah, because at the end, the monkey says monkey needs a hug, I think, and that's when Nish says, oh, it's still alive, and he goes, yeah, because it's also illegal to terminate it. Yeah. We can't kill it. So so it was illegal to put them into anything, and that's why. So basically, Carrie is still in there.
Yeah. It's hard to fathom, isn't it? Because like the concept of eternity is really kind of hard. Like it's hard to get your head around, isn't it? But she's in there forever, just staring into space.
A couple of things for me on this little bit before we move on. So firstly, Yeah, I recognise the guy who plays Jack. He's Aldous Hodge from, I don't know if anyone's seen a program called Leverage, but I'd seen him in that, so it was funny seeing him in that. But there was two things. One was it shocked me because the way she ended up in the coma was she's trying to take a picture of the boy in the pram, isn't she? She steps backwards into the road and gets hit by a bus, wasn't it? And that kind of really made me jump. The other thing about it, and do you know what? I've just completely forgotten what that was. I need to use the other 60% of my brain more.
There's also a bit of foreshadowing in this as well. So as she was, I think we were having breakfast at the time, and the television was on. There was like a news report about Clayton Lee.
Yes. Yeah.
And she told him to turn it off because it was too violent or something like that. She didn't want him to be seeing that kind of news story. So, which kind of follows on to the next story.
The term that Rollo used, whatever his name was a ground of imagine having a backseat driver forever. And just the thought of that, just like, it makes you like cringe, doesn't it? Inside, if someone's always judging your every thought, feeling, the way you look at a girl. The other thing I found quite interesting about this one, I kind of was thinking a bit outside the box, is when he's meeting this new girl and starting this new relationship. It's obviously quite hard to tell someone, oh, by the way, I've got a jealous ex. That's a bit of a red flag as it is. But to have to explain, oh, that ex lives inside my head and I can't get her out. And I don't know. I'd love to have seen that conversation play out because I think that would have been really fascinating.
That's the thing. And James, you reminded me now of what I was going to say. So I'll come back to that one first before I completely forget it. But where I thought the episode was going to go was put yourself in position of the kid. He kept seeing his dad talking to himself, arguing with himself, saying that his mum was there and then that the mum was in the teddy bear. And I thought that it was going to be something that the kid was going to snap and maybe something was going to happen with the kid because it just, the guy is arguing with himself like there is somebody else
and
there.
The kid's not allowed to grieve properly, right? Like, the kid's got to get used to the idea of his mum passing away and then being told, oh, by the way, your mum's in your dad's head. I just don't think as a child that's very healthy.
And also, sorry, you raised a really good point, James. The story about the murdered weather girl, I think, was also in the first story. It was mentioned in that. So that was a key thing to call out. It's just it is a bizarre thing because the other thing I'd also picked up on when he realizes he can pause her and he paused her for a couple of months. I think they come to an agreement that he pauses her for weekdays and unpauses her for weekends. So it's like the weirdest arrangement, almost like a custody arrangement, isn't it? It's it's bizarre. It's bizarre.
He said as well, sorry, Dan S rather. He said that that it's not good. It's not good for the kid to have that. He can't grieve properly. But even then, I don't know at what point he stopped or at all grieved because he threw the monkey away, and then what does that? He knows his mum's in there.
Yeah.
But he just threw it away. So what does that symbolise? I don't know. So it's maybe a question to ponder.
But that's the other thing, the fact that it's in a teddy bear, right? Because when the kid gets to like 16, 17, when the kid gets to 20, 25, he's going to have have a teddy bear, bring a teddy bear around with him all the time. And at some point, it's going to look a bit odd, right? Yeah, that's my mum.
He's going to go to his 21st birthday party and have the speech, mum, speech.
Do you not feel that when this decision was made, there was kind of like no long-term thinking? So when they were in that hospital, it's kind of like, it was kind of just in the short term, wasn't it? Oh, this will be quite cool short term. But there was just no thought into how it impacts the rest of your life.
But this is what I was going to say, because clearly, obviously, Jack himself is grieving. So I think the opportunity to have his wife with him again, you can imagine is great. But then, like I said, they're together almost in spirit and voices. But he is a bloke, and like I said, the neighbour moves in. The scene with the lift, James, that you pointed out. He checks the behind of that woman out because he now then wants to move on. So it's like he wants to keep her with him, but then has realised that in the end he now can't have Or he's almost living an odd life, isn't he? He can't have the life then that he probably would have done if he'd have grieved and moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything else about this one? I think we can come back to this one. I've got a couple of questions specifically about the technology, but
I feel like we could talk
there
about this
anything
one for ages. There's so much ethical thoughts processes around this one.
Well, this one kind of reminded me of the cookie section from White Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah.
This to me felt like a duplicate of that, especially when you see her. She's sitting in a chair as well in his brain, isn't she? I think so. Yeah, it feels like that came from that.
I've kind of written down as well that the themes of ethical responsibility and the dark side of scientific kind of innovations. I'm a computing science teacher, and I talk about technology and software all the time in school, and we talk about testing software, make sure it's it's compatible, make sure it's it's doing what it's meant to do, and I think this kind of is the beta testing for this is the it's something to think about. You know what I mean? So this is like untested technology, on human beings. It's people's lives, and it's just kind of playing with people's lives, really, and that's no ethical at all, is it?
And the thing is, he's put into a position where he has to choose. So he's got the love of his life in a coma, and there's a chance to give him some hope. So I think actually, in the spur of a moment, you probably would make that decision without the, do you lose the love of your life, or do you find a way for him to live on? And I think that's despite the long-term implications, it's a very hard decision to make, isn't it?
I was just going to say, when you've got Rolo there, who's the salesman, he's
convincing, right?
Oh, he's convinced you, all right.
But this is what I was going to say. So the first story, you can absolutely see why that tech you'd want to use it, and why especially a doctor would, because there is a really, really valid reason there. There are people that can't speak the language, children, animals. You could use it on animals, right? They can't talk. But this one, I just can't see where the good in it comes from, because putting it into your brain, your mind, that's shown that it is going to drive you crazy. I mean, imagine if she just started singing at him, she was annoyed with him, and starts shouting just through all hours of the night. But then also putting it into an object, that object is liable to get thrown away, destroyed, damaged. It's odd putting someone's soul or being into that. And what do you then keep doing? Is it like a disk drive that you just take it out of that one and you put it into a new laptop? Do you know what I mean? You just keep upgrading. It's odd. It's odd.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that sentiment. It's the first one you can see the good because of medical science. The second one, it doesn't take long to find the long-term flaws, does it? Where it quickly becomes a big problem.
If it was a digital version or something, you can understand it, but
And remember, he made that decision without knowing the pause button was there. So he made that decision with the knowledge that she's going to be in there forever talking to him. And it's I reckon 2 days before he gets fed up with that. I don't reckon it takes him long.
Because doesn't it become that Rollo at some point almost feels like he's a marriage counsellor at some point? It's like a therapist, counsellor, and he goes from sleazy car salesman to marriage counsellor.
And he also asked the question as well when they're getting the kind of final upgrade, so to speak. He asks, "Is she turned off now?" And he's like, "Yes, let me talk."
But also on when she knows, the thing I just thought of, now she knows that she's been paused for 5 days. The first thing when he unpauses her, the first thing she's going to say is, "What have you done?" And I'm just, not to you two, obviously, but to people listening, I just want you to think what you get up to in a week, and imagine if somebody was seeing through your eyes. That's all I'm saying. Tell you what, Dan, let's go on to the final bit, and then, like I said, we can obviously come back and cover various things.
Yeah. So just before we start, a funny bit about this is when I text Dan this last night. So I watched this episode last night, but I was watching it late after a long day, and I knew I needed to talk through the third story. And just as the third story came on, I fell asleep as I was watching it. So I've had to watch the last 20 minutes again to write the notes. So the third story, as you kind of touched upon, reverts back to Clayton, who has been mentioned on news stories in the previous 2 episodes. and Clayton is a murderer who's about to face trial. And this is a bit where he kind of goes, Rollo goes into behind the red curtain, as in his main attraction of what he's been talking about. And he starts talking to Nish. It's Nish, isn't it? Nish, yeah. He starts talking to Nish about his kind of latest attraction and what happens. And I feel at this point his tone begins to change. Whereas I feel like he, even though he talked factually about the other two stories, in this story, he definitely had a lot of hatred towards the prisoner and was kind of using it for his own benefit. But anyway, he goes into what looks like a prison cell, and in the corner there is what could be described as a virtual prisoner or hologram of a prisoner, and it kind of later turns on that this prisoner is kind of a digital upload of Clayton, who was convicted for murder
of the Weather Girl, the one that featured in the two previous years. So that's why, when I missed it, I couldn't believe I missed it out on my recap. Yeah.
So then he starts talking about what's happened, and he raised an interesting point, which I thought was good, because he kind of said this is kind of like the living Madame Tussauds, and they originally designed this technology for celebrities, but they found that the image rights were so much harder to get, and like legal stuff, and he couldn't get it. But for convicted killers, it was easy. And I thought that bit was quite interesting, because we have had in the modern world, haven't we, where celebrities have protected the image of their face or copyrighted the image of their face so they can't be used in future movies. So, this is definitely a thing.
Well, look at we've got a couple of football pods here between us. Well, the footballers' image rights, that kind of sometimes what causes a transfer and stuff to break down, right?
Yeah.
It's image rights, everything to celebs, yeah.
I think Bruce Willis is a famous one, isn't it? Who's protected his image, so he can't be used in films in the future digitally. But anyway, so it kind of cuts back to this story where Clayton is in a prison. Rollo goes in with his salesman technique to sell his latest gizmo. Probably the most trial and error person that we've seen. And Clayton's obviously reluctant to do this to start with. But then Rollo gives him the opportunity to say, well, actually, if you do this, if you upload your digital self and you do get put down, your family are going to be looked after for life, because there's going to be a lot of money in this. So he eventually convinces Clayton. I think Clayton, in a talk with his wife or his girlfriend, kind of says, we need to do this. I don't really have a soul. Let's do this to kind of look after the family. And if I don't get pardoned, then you will be looked after. And at this point, and then it goes on to him getting electrocuted in the electric chair. So he's obviously found guilty of murder and gets killed. And at that point, Rollo takes the upload and says it's been successful. It then cuts back to Nish, who then starts to raise some doubt in the story, and kind of implied, actually, wasn't there some controversy and wasn't there some evidence to suggest he is innocent? But Rollo is so kind of in his narrative that this guy was guilty and this was a great day for justice. But he kind of carried on for the story. But that's the first kind of moment you begin to detect there's some disagreement. As I said, he then gets electrocuted. After the electrocution, it cuts back to this jail cell. And Clayton is what he describes as born again in this cell in a museum. And it's obviously at this point he's using the digital version of Clayton for his own benefit and to also almost create a tourist attraction, I guess similar to what we saw in that, I've forgotten the episode now, Victoria Scalane, isn't it?
White Bear.
White Bear.
Yeah, White Bear.
So it's kind of similar to that, where he's created an electrocution sort of game or attraction for people to come in.
It's an interactive game, isn't it? Almost, isn't it? Or exhibit, sorry, yeah.
It was a theme park, wasn't it, White Bear? Like a theme park?
Yes.
Yeah. White Bear was a theme park. So he's obviously got a lot of people coming into this museum, and it flashes back to the museum when it was busier. Clayton is talking to the people that are pulling the switch on his virtual electric chair and saying, don't do it. So you can tell at this point that the virtual version of Clayton is feeling pain and terror at kind of what he's going through. And it's a big draw for the museum, and the museum's making a lot of money for it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, because what happens, there's a lever on the wall. When they pull it, it's like transported into a holographic electric chair.
Yeah.
and he's electrocuted. And I think he said he worked out the optimal time.
Yeah.
Is 10 seconds.
10 seconds. And he makes it clear, doesn't he? 10 seconds is the optimum time. If it was for 15 seconds, it would kill him off or kill kind of the hologram. So he just has these people pulling 10 seconds at a time, 10 seconds at a time, 10 seconds at a time. And, he's obviously feeling this pain as he's going through it. But the museum, the tourists begin to get bored, from what I gather. It's not as busy. It's not such a draw. And it begins to kind of dry up a little bit. And any kinds of gets kind of the sick freaks come in, people who are addicted to this, people who kind of get off from causing pain. And there's a bit of these customers paying extra cash to be able to pleasure themselves while watching this thing, which is quite disturbing in itself.
I think he says, she says sadists and white supremacists ultimately, wasn't it? Who start coming in because they're the only ones who want to interact.
The one bit I left off of it actually is when the tourists are able to, when the tourists are pulling the lever and electrocuting this guy, they're able to get a permanent reminder in a keyring of.
And I wanted to ask you about this. Right, because I was going to come back before you gave the big reveal, because it's almost like in a Tamagotchi, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like an image of him screaming in a Tamagotchi. So what I didn't know, is it just like a bit of memorabilia, or I wasn't sure if it was almost like a little bit of him, like the image in there was real.
I think they tried to imply it's like a miniature version of him be like caught in pain forever.
So it was someone who was feeling pain. Is that what we think?
That's what I
think. Okay.
But quite disturbing to have as a keyring. But there you go. Different people like different things, I guess. As I said, kind of then we get some people disturbed and paying more money. But throughout this time, you can tell that the hologram or the hologram version of Clayton is degrading. All this torture he's going through and all this pain, he's obviously becoming less and less human as time goes on, to the point where his wife comes in and there's a question mark of whether he actually recognised who she was. In parallel to this, and when it flashes back to Rollo and Nish, you begin to see Rollo getting more and more sick as time goes on. And then there's a bit of a reveal, and it all kind of comes together in a few seconds, doesn't it? Where you realise that the bottle of water that she offered him earlier is actually poison, and he's actually slowly almost dying or becoming more sick as time goes on. And she tells him to sit down and reveals that she's actually Clayton's daughter. And, this was a bit more of a plain thing. She claims that you should never accept drinks from strangers, and that's what her dad taught her. And as he gets more and more sick, she places a chip onto him. And then she says quite a few things. I didn't note them all down, which I thought was really clever, the way she does it. So what she does is she takes, as she puts the chip in, she uploads a consciousness from Rollo and puts it into Clayton, her dad. And she starts to talk to him about what she's been planning and what's about to happen next. And one of the phrases I picked up and wrote down was, "You're about to be a pioneer because you're about to be the first person that goes through a double-decker mercy killing." And I feel like I had to think that through a little bit as to kind of what she was trying to apply. And essentially what she's done is she's put, using the technology that Rollo's designed, she's put his consciousness into her dad. She's then removed the 10-second limit on the electrocution so that when she pulls the limit, it's going to go for longer than 10 seconds and set her dad free. So this is one more electrocution to set her dad free and not be in pain anymore. But he's going to feel it for eternity is kind of what I've get. Is he's going to go beyond that 10 seconds and carrying on feeling it forever. So she pulls the lever. And the other thing I should add here is when she pulls the lever, she's made sure that the monkey from the previous story, she's taken it out of the cabinet and the monkey is watching this torture go on, which I thought was quite clever as well. So now her dad has been set free. The hologram changes. She gets her little keyring with Rollo in constant pain in the picture. She then takes the monkey with her back to the car. She then she had this thing with the air condition, didn't she? Where she was able to hack the air condition and make.
I think she blocked it
She
basically, so he
blocked
started
it.
sweating.
He started sweating and needed the drink, which is why he got the drink in the
Yeah.
first place. So she does something with the air condition that almost sets the museum on fire. And then she walks away and gets in the car and drives away. And then the last reveal is that she talks to her mum, who's obviously a consciousness in her head. So she's gone through the same surgery or the same procedure as the second story. So her mum is now sitting in her head and saying that she's done a good job. I'm proud of you. And she drives off into the sunset with a bear and her mum in her head.
Oh, and she's got the little Tamagotchi of
On the
Rollo,
mirror.
Yeah. So, James, I think I'm going to give you first right to reply on this. But yeah, I love this. And all I will say is, because I almost said it at the start of mine, but the other thing I loved, and this is what I think sometimes Black Mirror does well, instead of going through all the Easter eggs, as the episode starts and she's driving, that song, Always Something There to Remind Me, is it Dusty Springfield was playing?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, when you look back on it, she's got a mum in her head, right? And you could say that's the thing that's reminded her. But now when she drives off, she's got the thing of Rollo as well. And I just think, because that song plays, and for me anyway, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think often all these things in Black Mirror are perfectly planned. And I thought that was a lovely, lovely little twist. But yeah, James, so talk to me about this episode
Right,
then.
okay, so I think at the start of the episode, of the podcast episode that is, that I kind of gave my game away a wee bit. I loved it. I like the way it's kind of, it's kind of like an anthology. It's broken up into wee stories, and
Yeah,
I've always been a fan of Black Mirror, but there is some Black Mirror episodes that are a bit sketchy, and some are
definitely, yeah.
and some are kind of, I find it hard to engage with at the start. The way this started, I think the characters were brilliant, and I just like the kind of segments, the narration as well of each of the stories were great. The technology was, I know we'll come on to technology in every second or two, but certainly I think the technology, as I said, I'm a computer science teacher, so Black Mirror is right down my street, especially when it comes to being very kind of dystopian. I love that sort of thing. I think the stories it wasn't too long. I know it's kind of a long episode, I think, but I think it was well paced throughout.
Definitely,
I thought it was just enough time just to get as much information, take in, be able to go, oh, that's interesting, have your thoughts on it, and then move on to the next one. And then it kind of built its way, from the very first story, talking about, how ethical it is, or unethical rather, to the main attraction and how unethical that was. It felt like as if the ethics became, worse as the story progressed. If that makes sense.
And no, I get it. And especially as he's running a museum with all these artifacts from all the previous episodes. So, he's someone who relishes in this kind of like dark, horrific history of the items behind it. He's getting a kick out of it, it feels like, isn't he?
That's his addiction, isn't it?
Yeah. So I will say it, Dan, I'll pass over to you. But I will say I love this. I love the end bit. I love the reveal. I thought it was done really well. I just love the fact that she sort of played the long game as well. Nish played the long game with him and almost allowed him to almost not incriminate himself, but allow it. I do wonder whether, not that she'd need any motivation to do what she did to him, but almost hearing those previous two stories felt like that was almost like all the confirmation she needed that what she was doing, she was justified in.
Agreed. And just to add a little bit to what you said there, I think the way she articulated that reveal, so the reveal was good, but I felt like the way she articulated it was brilliant, and kind of some of the terms that she said. Now, I kind of said to you just before we watched this episode, but I don't remember enjoying this one. And and the thing is, I've watched it this time, and I really did enjoy it. And I don't know what happened last time, but yeah, I did really enjoy it. I felt like the the three stories, I guess, could have all been episodes by themselves in their own right. They could easily have fleshed them out. So they're all three really good stories, all with their own effort. We could probably do an hour's podcast on each one of those stories if we wanted to, because there's quite a few dilemmas in there. I liked all the callbacks. to the previous episodes. I thought that was really clever, the way that was done. I think there's about 14 or 15 in there. I think there's a mention from every single episode.
Well, I've got a thing. There's a reference to every previous episode, all 18 previous episodes. There's something in there. So if you watch it, you'll find something. Yeah.
That's really clever. I thought both Nish, the actress that played her, and Rollo, I thought were brilliant. I thought the way they spoke was really added to it. So yeah, I thought it was a really, really good episode.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you said absolutely was something I was thinking that for me, each of the 3 episodes or elements, could be episodes, and they were all compelling, I think, in their own way. Like they were classic, what I would call Black Mirror. There was that dark undertone to it, but there was that kind of edge of the technology where you could see why they would invent it or want it. And yeah, each one had its undertone, and the fact that they were all linked, along with the reveal at the end. Yeah, for me, I just really, really enjoyed it because of that. And I thought the acting again by everyone, so even the ones in the individual stories. I mean, the guy who played the Doctor, I mean, that's a role and a half you've got to play there, right?
Talk about the reveal at the end. I mean, I kind of almost, I don't remember off the top of my head, but you can almost kind of, think though that could be, his daughter at that point in time. But you would never, in my opinion anyway, have realised that, the mother's consciousness was inside Nish, It's that. It was like a twist and a twist. It's like almost like Inception in terms of, it's like there's kind of layers of twists and things in there. So, yeah, I didn't see that one coming for sure. And to be I didn't think I seen Nish being the daughter of Clayton.
I didn't see her being the daughter up until she revealed it, of course, but I felt like that was a really clever way of doing it, because obviously throughout, like at the start, because she kind of said that she was from England, didn't she? She was from Britain and had a British accent.
That's right, yeah.
And then the part of the reveal was like, oh, I don't have a British accent. I'm actually from here, type thing. So it's, yeah, I didn't see it coming.
You see at the start of the episode, you see her messing around with the air conditioning, and then you see, Rollo drinking the water. It's almost as if you thought something. And he drinks the water really fast as well. You can see he's sweating. You can see he's really thirsty and things. And it's just like something's not right here.
Yeah,
and
it's quite clever, isn't it? Because they capture these everyday moments, like him having a drink, and you quickly skip over it as that's an everyday thing.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the end, you realise actually that was quite a big moment in this story. You don't realise it at the time.
Well, like the news report of the weather girl being murdered.
Yes, yeah.
Who'd have thought, right? That's what I was going to say. I think what they did clever, I didn't see the twist coming. I think I allowed myself just to get carried away with the episode. But I think the reason being is, one, you don't really get a sense of time, how much time has passed, I think, over the stories. So or maybe I missed it. Maybe they do say it. But also, I think saving Clayton's story till the end, I think means you have less time thinking, maybe that is she there for revenge or anything. But also, where I thought it was going to go with him acting odd was, I was wondering if it was a museum where he would then bring people in and he would murder them or capture them and put them into some sort of exhibit. So I thought it was going to be the opposite twist, which is maybe the obvious twist. I thought he was luring them in and he was acting weird because he had something in him, some part of this tech or something that made him basically get off on feeling fear or something.
Yeah.
See as well, sorry, before we go into scores and things, see where it kind of, when she first came into the museum, his initial thoughts were, come on, let's go and see the main attraction, because that's what people done. They skip by everything, but she wanted to incriminate him with him telling these stories, where these artefacts came from, because she was recording them the whole time. And so that was him incriminating himself. So yeah, she could have went to the main attraction and seen her dad sooner, but she wanted this whole revenge, and she was very patient in doing it. And like you say, Dan, it was very well executed.
I think it gives you no time to think about it, and then it is like a usual Suspects ending, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Go on, Dan.
Do you know what's funny about that whole scene where he kind of made it at the start? He goes, the main attraction is behind the red curtain, but actually look around the other stuff first because it's all good. It did actually, ironically, at the time when I was watching it, reminded me of when I took my kids to Madame Tussauds. and they wanted to skip past every single, like, he's only 7 years old. He wanted to go straight to the Marvel section. He wasn't bothered about,
Yeah.
the famous singers or the celebrities. He wanted to go straight to Marvel and see Spider-Man and the Hulk. And ironically, it reminded me of that scene. And then actually later on in the episode, he described Madame Two Swords and kind of what he was aiming for. So I thought that was quite funny.
It is interesting. He plays a really interesting character because, like I said, there's obviously something in him that, well, the stuff he's invented anyway is bad enough. Then having the museum with all these, I forgot what I called it, criminologically historical artifacts. But it's almost like he's really angry that he was fired from that role in the hospital. And he's angry that he's just reduced to this. It's almost like he still wanted to be out there doing more of the actual suffering.
Yeah.
And you kind of got that feeling from him, didn't you?
Yeah.
There's a few things I've got before we sort of look at wrapping up. So Black Museum was the original name for the Crime Museum, which was a museum of crime artefacts at Scotland Yard. There you go. So it's actually something based on truth. They believed the museum served as an analogy, easy for me to say, to the series, which is about finding addictive entertainment value in the plight of removed dystopias. Now, did any of you, in your looking at this, find out what the idea or the reason for the first element was, the doctor one? Do you know what created that?
No.
So, do you know Penn Jillette, from Penn and Teller, the magicians? Yeah. So Penn Jillette wrote a short story called The Pain Addict, and it was based on an actual experience he had. So in 1981, he was in a Spanish hospital where he found it difficult to get a diagnosis due to the language barrier. So he conceived of a technology that allowed the doctor to understand what pain a person was suffering, but led to the doctor's addiction to the pain of others. And the story continued with the doctor beating people to feel their pain and engaging in sadomasochism. So it actually came from a short story that was never published, but I think he contacted... it was published as a short story in 1988. And Gillette met with Brooker before the production of the third series to tell him about this story. So yeah, it all came from that.
Oh, cool.
Which I love. I love how some of these things come together. So before we get into scores, does anybody want to say anything else about any of the episode general or any of the elements?
Do you see yourself, so there's 3 elements of technology here, would you see yourself ever in a circumstance where you would sign up for any of those 3 elements of technology? Or put them in order of most likely?
Well, number 3 would be at the bottom.
Do you reckon? I reckon number 2 would be at the bottom. The thought of having someone in your head the whole time.
Well, hold on. No, are you saying whether you would be that person?
Let's order them in stages of 1 to 3. So
let's have it if the technology is done to you, though.
Right. Technology is done to you. Which one would you rather have? Yeah, which one would you rather have compared to which one you'd least likely want to have?
I think... Actually, tell what, Dan, you've asked the question. You go first.
I don't think that's how this works. But
James, I tend to do this. When there's a question, I'll let Dan go first.
I think number 3, the third one, creating a digital consciousness, I think I could live with that happening. So I'd put that as not my favourite, but the one I'd want. I can't work out the double negatives, how to explain that. But I'd put that as number 1 because I think I can live with a digital version of myself because I'd be dead. So I think that'd be fine. And then it's between the feeling others' pain. I think I'd put the feeling other people's pain, having that power, I'd put as number 2. And then the one I'd want the least is having someone in my head.
Okay. What about in your Xbox controller or your PlayStation controller? James.
Right, okay. I think, yeah. And the one with, the consciousness, that's last. I wouldn't fancy that at all. I'm going to switch. I know I sat on the fence earlier on when we asked this question, but certainly, just to be different, I'm going to put the hairnet number 1, purely because I think actually that I would do for good, and I wouldn't make the same mistakes as the doctor did and become addicted to the pain. I would find a way to manage that, and the digital hologram I'll put that at number 2.
I think I match you, James. I would definitely have the consciousness thing bottom. That would be awful, wouldn't it? I would have the digital bit second because, then like you saw, it became a plaything for someone else. And I was thinking, I guess also are they having to capture it at your death? So again, if I'm like 90 and can barely walk, what's my digital version of me going to do? It's going to be...
He won't be running down the street. Let's put
he won't be running down the street. Well, I don't do that now, to be fair. So yeah, I think I would go for the physical sensation hairnet and hope I do it for good as well. Yeah, good question, Dan. Good question. Anything else before we wrap up?
No.
We are going to give scoring. I think we should go to the guest first then.
Okay, so on our podcast in Seismic Cinema, we did a Black Mirror ranking. We rated our top 10 Black Mirror episodes. And I can't remember what I gave this. I know it wasn't number 1 in my list, but I'm going to give it a 10. I'm going to go 9.5. I'll give it a 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dan, I don't have, because I'm on a different laptop, I don't have our previous scores here.
Oh,
so
come on. I use that as a reference point.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking like James, because I really like this, but I don't think it's necessarily my top one, but it's going to be close there. So what's yours?
I wanted to put it 0.1 below what I scored for White Christmas. I can't remember what I scored for White Christmas. So I'm going to take an educated guess. I'm going to give it 8.9.
Going to give it 8.9?
Yeah,
I think I'm going to give it a 9.2 because I'm trying to hedge my bets because I'm sure I've given a 9.4 to something. So look, I really, really enjoy this episode. I think it's brilliant. Oh, I did actually want to ask you guys, about the fact that it's a celebration of all the previous episodes as well. I mean, what did you think about that? Because now it is clear the Black Mirror universe is a real universe now. I think that's now, because we always joke, Dan, don't we, about, are we going to see the Prime Minister reference or Waldo? And we think it could just be a little in-joke for the programme. But this is now definitive. Black Mirror is a shared universe, right? So that makes it interesting, right?
Yeah, agreed. I like the way we did it. I thought it was a clever way of doing it. And it didn't take anything away from the story they were telling, which I think you can sometimes do with some of these, we're trying to flash back to the past. So yes, I thought it was cleverly done. Discreetly, but cleverly in your face.
Yeah. Like the names of the rats. And also the other one I found was, I can't remember what character it was. It was either Jack or the son, but it's reading a comic called 15 Million Merits, which was obviously based on that.
Yes.
It's a clever little thing like that. Okay, James, any final words? It's always a horrible phrase to say, isn't it? Any final words on this episode?
Just you've said there that there was a mention of every episode. It's a celebration of every episode. I thought when I watched it, when I seen it, you could tell it was like a kind of homage to every other episode. And I thought when I seen this, it was maybe the last Black Mirror episode it would be, because it's kind of referencing every other kind of episode in some way, shape or form. So I'm glad it's not. I mean, there's some good episodes thereafter, but this is always one I would go back to. So if you're watching, listening to this, then check this episode out, because it's definitely top 3 for me.
Actually, really good point. It did feel like you could almost imagine it being the final episode of the series, right?
Yeah,
it did have that feel.
I wonder if that's how he
revenge.
intended it, though, whether he didn't know he was going to make any more after this.
Maybe. Oh, and actually, you just reminded me as well, James, that they are now doing, Dan, did you see they are doing a spin-off series of USS Callister, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
Are they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, did you not see the news?
No.
Oh, yeah, because somebody tagged me in. I think it might be somebody in your pod as well. Somebody tagged me in. Yeah, they're going to do almost like a mini-series of USS Callister.
Nice.
So,
because that is my favourite episode, USS Callister, just because it's the Star Trek references. So, yes.
Get you on for that. Because Dan actually said, didn't you? Dan, you said, I think you thought that was your first episode you saw, and you thought it was going to be all about that, didn't you?
Yeah, because when I started watching Black Mirror, I think Netflix orders them in a really weird order.
They do, yes.
Even today, they order them in a weird order. And I remember watching it, and I watched the first episode, and this was the first one on their list at the time. Like Dan said, I thought everything was going to be based around this starship because I knew nothing about Black Mirror. So when I watched the second one and none of those characters are in it, I felt a bit confused. But
yeah, okay. James, thank you very much for coming on.
No.
Enjoyed having your voice on to discuss this.
Thank you very much for having me on, man. It's I've enjoyed it very much.
Do you just want to just shout the podcast again before we go?
Yeah, okay. So we are Seismic Cinema, and we are a film and TV podcast. We also do Seismic Soccer, which is a football podcast. We talk about everything in terms of football around the world. You can find us on YouTube, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, all the socials that are out there. And Colin will give me a row, actually, if I don't do this. So I'm going to say it. So we are Seismic Cinema, and we believe in the power of escapism, which is our kind of tagline, our motto. So check us out, folks. Thank you.
For us, we'll be back. Actually, Dan, I think the next episode in chronological order was that Bandersnatch, but I think I want to save that till the end. Did you ever watch?
I've never watched that one.
Yeah.
You're not watching.
It's the one
because I want to be able to
interactive.
take. Yeah, I want to take my time with that, and I want to do that properly. And then because you and I are probably going to have different things, so I think we'll probably skip straight to Series 5, Episode 1, which will be Striking Vipers. Yeah, and we'll come back to Bandersnatch. I think we'll make Bandersnatch the last episode we do. So, Dan, anything from you before we go?
No, nothing else for me.
Well, catch the next Cast Reflections on Black Mirror. It will be out hopefully in a week's time. We'll see you then.
1, 2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, take what we've got, 'cause you need it. Don't make us get a spark and force feed.